وعلى آله أقدار العظيم. Alhamdulillah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. May peace be upon you, everyone, wherever you are, together with your family and friends. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you with good health, well-being, and in a good state of iman, inshallah, in this time of pandemic. May Allah ease our affairs and suffice our need. Alhamdulillah, praise be to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for His mercy, guidance, and compassion and love that we are once again online tonight on this blessed month of Sha'ban with our beloved teacher, mentor, and guide, Shaykh Aziz Ahmad Fredericks. Alhamdulillah, on his second class, on the 40, the four principle of the Deen from Ulumuddin by Imam Ghazali. So before we get into the class, I'd just like to share again about the bio of Shaykh, so that for those who are first time watching this online, will know about him, inshallah. Shaykh Abdul Aziz Ahmad Fredericks was born in Nottingham in the United Kingdom, where he completed his schooling before moving to Leicester for university studies. He completed a BD degree in primary education, specializing in language arts. He then went on to carry out postgraduate studies in education in various universities, including London University Institute of Education, Starlight University, and the Open University. He also did research at the School of Oriental and African Studies. He had published a number of articles on education and design the curriculum of Islamia School London. At the time, it achieved voluntary aided status. The curriculum was published by the Islamia School Trust. He edited many books on Islam, including several under the direct supervision of his teacher Fatullah Gulen. He has worked as a teacher, head teacher, and school principal in England, Scotland, South Africa, Saudi Arabia, and United States of America. As an educational consultant, he has worked on projects in Turkey, Yemen, Kenya, Jordan, and South Africa. He has a special interest in special educational needs and additional support, and currently works full-time as additional support manager for a local education authority. He has worked as a policy advisor for several education authorities and schools, including the UK Madrasa Network. His Islamic studies took him to various parts of the world, where he studied under prominent and traditional scholars, and one of them is Habib Mashur Al-Haddad, under whom he studied in Jeddah, and Shaykh Abdul Rahman Al-Kitami in Kenya. He translated the Essential of Islam, Risalah to Jamia by Abi Ahmad bin Zain Al-Habshi, and 40 Hadiths on the Quran by Mullah Ali and Al-Qari, and is currently working on translation of Al-Nasir Dinia by Habib Abdul Haddad, which is already out in published, and also Riyadus Sibian, which is a very popular book that has been teaching in Singapore, in fact, educating the children, by Imam Ramli. Shaykh Abdul Aziz uses his teaching experience and a variety of modern teaching methods and an interactive style. He has taught various books around the world, including the Book of Existence of Habib Abdullah Haddad and the 40 Hadith for Imam Nawawi. His interest in special educational needs drove him to co-found the organization Islamic Text for the Blind, Kitab, and the Islamic Text for the Blind produces books in braille and audio format, provides accessible online classes, and has an accessible website with Islamic resources and translation. They work with government and voluntary organizations to meet the religious and cultural needs of disabled Muslims, inshallah. Shaykh Abdul Aziz authored the book Living with Blindness, which was used to launch a number of conferences on the marginalized in society, addressing the issue of disability and access to mosques, institutions, and Islamic teachings. He is an active campaigner for free and open access to Islamic teaching for all. Currently, she is living in Glasgow, which he is right now teaching all of us to all over the world. Before we start the class, I just like to remind that you can send your question pertaining to this class today at 906-87106. If you are overseas, +65 906-87106. Alhamdulillah. Now I call upon Shaykh Aziz to deliver the class today. Inshallah, may all of us benefit. Tafadhal, Shaykh.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وصلى اللهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد الفاتح لما أغلق والخاتم لما سبق ناصر الحق بالحق والهادي إلى صراطك المستقيم وعلى آله وصحبه حق قدره ومقداره العظيم. So alhamdulillah, this is the second opportunity or second lesson we have on the famous book of Imam Al-Ghazali, known as the Al-Arba'un, or the 40 principles on the of the religion, which is an abridged version or a shortened version of the book Ihya Ulumuddin, which we gave a brief introduction to last week and explained that the book Ihya Ulumuddin is really about bringing to life the knowledge that is found in the sciences of the deen, sciences of the religion, rather than to focus on the rules and regulations of the religion. And of course, the reason why that is because there's many other books that deal with that. And for this particular approach, what we're doing is trying to get to the essence of those rules and to try and put into practice the meanings of the different aspects of religious sciences. So last week we read the majority of the chapter we covered last week, but we left two very important paragraphs till this week. But to recap, what I want to perhaps do first is to go back to the word sawm, or siyam, which is the Arabic word for fasting, and to reiterate the meaning in Arabic is to hold back from something, to not do something, to hold back from something with a particular purpose, with an intention. So and the example that was given, or several examples were given. One of them is directly from the Quran, where the mother of Jesus, Sayyidatuna Maryam, mother of Jesus, Sayyidatuna Maryam, Mother Mary, she said when she was told that she was to receive the Immaculate Conception, a child born miraculously without a father, there would be accusations made against her. And when those accusations are made against her, she was to indicate to them by ishara, by pointing, that she was not to speak, but rather that she would leave it in Allah's hands. And that's why she says, Inni nadhartu lirrahmani sawman, and I have made a promise to the Most Merciful to do sawm. And what's meant in this sense, sawm, means that she wouldn't respond to their accusations, and she wouldn't even speak when they made these accusations. And as we know, the story continues, for that when they came tahmilu, make these accusations, for asharat ilay, so she pointed to the baby in the cradle, and they said, Kayfa nukallimu man kana fil mahdi sabiya, how can we speak to a child, a baby who's in his cradle? And then the Prophet Jesus, he said, Inni Abdullah atani al-kitab wa ja'alani nabiyyan wa ja'alani mubarakan ayyama kunt, to the rest of the ayah. He says, I am indeed the servant of God, and I am indeed a prophet. So this was the proof. But to get to that point, she was told to not respond. And that's why in another verse she says, Lam ukallim al-yawm insiya, on this day I will not speak to anybody. So this concept of holding back is very important, because what the meaning of sawm, the meaning of fasting, is to hold back And this example is very important because many of us face attacks, we face accusations, we face aggression, we face a lot of things. And what we are taught is to hold back from that anger and to reflect on that and to learn the quality of what we call hilm, of forbearance. It doesn't mean that we have no right to respond, but it should come after hilm. Hilm is what's most important, and that is to hold back. So the purpose of the fast, or the purpose of the Psalm, is to learn this self-restraint. So we spend 1 month of the year focusing largely on this self development, to develop the inner qualities, so that we can live a better, more qualified, a better life through not reacting, through not attacking, through not giving in to our desires, by not giving in to even our the things that are natural to us, but rather controlling those things, getting in control of those things, so that we can raise for a higher order. And one of the best examples linguistically of the word Psalm is where one says Sa'amat ash-shams, is when the sun is said to have reached its peak of the day. And it's said that it's Sa'amat ash-shams means it's reached, it's no longer moving. The shadow disappears from the ground because the sun is above. Or one says Sa'amat ar-rih, that the wind is doing Psalm. And you don't say that, you don't translate it as the wind is fasting. What it means is that the wind has reached this point of calmness. The sun has reached its apex and reached its point of stillness. So this is what we strive for in the month of Ramadan. So when we look at the chapter, or we look at anything to do with fasting, we look at it and we say, this is the chapter, or this is the month of Psalm, the month of holding back and rising to that higher level spiritually. That's the first thing. And there are three things I want to discuss before we go into the body of the text. And these are all important because if you understand these three principles, then hopefully the text, then the paragraph that we're going to look at will be hopefully simpler. So that was the first point. What is the meaning of Psalm? It is to hold back. The second is that in the Quran, the eating of haram food, eating of illicit food, that which is not permitted, is connected to the vices, the actions of our limbs. So in effect, what it's saying is that the bad things that go into your stomach are connected to the bad things that come out through the limbs, through your speech, through your hearing, through your what you strive to hear. Because of course, there are those that we say they hear no evil, meaning that when they hear things happening, the bad things don't actually reach their hearts. That those bad things don't enter into their hearts through their ears, through their eyes, through their nose, through their mouths. So the verses of Quran that I particularly wanted to mention was where both of them appear in Surah Al-Ma'idah, which is the 5th surah of the Quran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, سَمَّعُونَ لِلْكَذِبِ أَكَالُونَ السُّحْتِ. They are the people who listen, they listen to lies. أَكَالُونَ السُّحْتِ. And what's the other quality they have? They eat that which is not allowed. So these two qualities are put together. And what the implication of this is that these two things are connected, that the eating of haram and the doing of haram are connected, and therefore the eating of halal and the doing of halal are connected, and therefore the restraining even from the halal with the intention of holding back from that because Allah has commanded to, will then lift us and our qualities higher. So that's what's implied in this. And the other verse which comes later in the same surah, it says, لَوْ لَا يَنْهَاهُمْ الرَّبَّانِيُّونَ وَالْأَحْبَارُ عَنْ قَوْلِهِمُ الْإِثْمِ أَكَالُوا أَوْ أَكْلِهِمْ السُّحْتِ. He says, wouldn't it have been, how come their leaders, their chiefs, their rabbis and their priests, they didn't forbid them from speaking al-ithm, speaking sinfully, saying bad things, and eating haram, وَأَكْلِهُمُ السُّحْتِ, eating the illicit. So here, As there's a phrase in English, you are what you eat. So what's implied in that, in these verses and in that common saying, is that what you're eating, and eating a great deal or eating the wrong things, will have an effect on your limbs, on how you behave. That's the second point. And connected to both of these 2 points is a statement or a story which shows the connection between fasting and our outer actions. And it refers to a story where 2 women were fasting during, actually it's understood that they weren't fasting in the month of Ramadan, they were fasting out of the month of Ramadan. So the majority of people were not fasting, and these 2 were. They got to the end, towards the end of the day, and they found it just too hard to continue. They couldn't. They wanted to. The hunger and the thirst overwhelmed them. So they sent a message to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who was at that time in the mosque, and they asked him for permission to break their fast. And what did the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did? He got a bowl, and he sent this with the messenger, and he says, "Kulluhuma, take this bowl, and say to the 2 ladies, Kia, throw up, vomit, fihi, whatever into it, ma akaltumu, what the 2 of you have eaten. So whatever you've eaten, throw it up into this bowl." So this message was sent back with the bowl, and the first one of them threw up into the bowl, and what came out was damman abitan wa lahman gharid. Now, what this means is, what she threw up was blood. Abit means the blood of this freshly slaughtered animal. So this is what amit means. So it's this blood. She threw up into this blood as if it was freshly slaughtered meat. Wa lahman gharid, and an uncooked meat. So this is what she threw up into the bowl, and then the second person, and she filled half the bowl, and the second person, the second lady threw up this again. She threw up, and she completed the bowl. And then when this came back to the Prophet, when the story came back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says they fasted with what was halal, and they broke their fast with what was haram. Indeed, they were backbiting. And this refers to a verse in the Quran which describes that the backbiting, speaking behind somebody's back, is like eating the flesh of your brother. So what they did is that they spoke evil. They spoke behind somebody's back, and this was manifest physically for the people to witness, in the form of them throwing up. So the lesson that we learn from this very important story is that there's a connection between what your fast and your actions beyond just not eating, because what they did was they didn't hold back from the haram things, which were, in this case, backbiting. So it's haram to backbite. So what they did is that they did something which was haram, even though it appeared outwardly that they were doing something which was good, which was fasting. And this goes back to what we said last week about the famous hadith where the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam related from his Lord that Allah had said, "Kullu amal ibn Adam lahu." All the actions of the child of Adam, the children of Adam, meaning humanity, lahu, are for him, illa sawm, except this particular act of worship, which is sawm, holding back, imsak, fasting. This act, li, فَإِنَّهُ li, and this indeed is for me. So this fasting is something that we can't see, and only Allah understands, only Allah knows what's really going on. And one of the most scary things when we think about this, when we think about this connection between our outward appearance of piety, so to speak, our outward actions of fasting and praying, but our inner actions of perhaps malice and anger hatred, and our physical actions are perhaps backbiting and looking at haram and listening to haram and these sort of things. One of the most profound statements was that of Abu Talib al-Makki, who was somebody who influenced Imam Al-Ghazali to write this book. He says, and I'll read it exactly as he wrote it in Arabic, فَالْعَبْدُ الْحَافِظ لِحُدُودِ اللَّهِ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ إِنْ أَفْطَرَ بِالْأَكَلِ وَالْجِمَاعِ فَهُوَ صَائِمٌ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ. He says that the slave, the servant of Allah, when he takes care of the limitations set by Allah, most majestic and mighty, even if he's not fasting, even if he's eating and he's drinking and he's enjoying relationships with his spouse, فَهُوَ صَائِمٌ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ, he will be considered to be fasting with Allah. فَهُوَ صَائِمٌ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ. So he's eating and drinking, but Allah counts him as fasting. فِي الْفَضْلِ الْإِتِّبَاعِ, because of the blessing, the excellence of obedience. So he's following what Allah tells him to do, and therefore, even though he's eating and drinking, Allah counts him as sa'im, as fasting. وَمَنْ صَامَ عَنِ الْأَكْلِ وَالْجِمَاعِ, but the person who fasts from eating and drinking, holds back from eating and drinking, وَتَعَدَّ الْحُدُودِ, but he goes over the boundaries, he transgresses the what Allah wants him to do, وَأَضَاعَ فَهُوَ مُفْتِرٌ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ, Allah counts him as somebody that's not fasting. وَالصَّائِمْ عِنْدَ نَفْسِهِ, although he himself considers himself to be fasting. And this is really, really worrying, because if we go into the month of Ramadan and we think that we're fasting, in our case, of 18 hours a day or 17 hours a day, we go through that whole 17 hours, and at the end of it, Allah doesn't even count it as fasting. Why? Because we haven't stayed within the limitations that Allah has set in terms of holding back our limbs from listening to the haram, from seeing the haram, from doing haram actions. And that's why it's said that there are three levels. Let me just go back first of all to that statement, because it's a very, very profound and very important statement about Abu Talib al-Makki. How can Allah say that? How can it be that that person's fasting and that person's not fasting? And this might relate to the question that was put last week about the person with diabetes. It might be that the person with diabetes is fasting in a better way than the person who doesn't have diabetes and is actually going without food and water. Why? Because if the person that is holding back from what Allah has forbidden that person to do, Allah will count them as fasting according to the statement. The reason why is because what they've given up has value. Allah has told them, don't lie, don't cheat, don't backbite, don't swear, don't tell lies, don't do this, don't do that, and they hold back. But they eat and they drink because Allah has permitted them because of their illness. They would be counted as fasting. Why? Because what they've given up is of value. What has the other person given up? He's given up food and water and jima and relationships with his spouse. So which one of those has more value? What Allah's command, or food and drink? So the reason why is because following his command in not lying, not doing all of these bad things, has greater value than giving up food and water, because giving up food and water is what people that diet do. But it doesn't have any value because all they're giving up is food and water, which is why the hadith where the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam says there are people, that ليس من الصائم ليس له صوم ليس من صومه إلا الجوع والعطش. That there are people who fast, outwardly fast, but they get nothing out of their fast except hunger and thirst. So it might be that that person that's holding back from lying and uses their time well actually gets greater reward than the person that's fasting but not adhering to what the purpose of the fast was, which is to make you a better person. Based on that, what we're going to read from the text is that there are three levels to the fast. There's what we call Sawm al-Am, the fast of the general populace. And that's what we all do. We all do without food. We all do without water. We all do without the rules of the fast. And then there's the Sawm al-Khusus, the fast of the real people, the special, the elect. And these are the people who fast, hold back from, they hold their limbs back from doing bad things. They don't use bad language. They don't listen to things that they're not supposed to listen to. They don't engage in discussions which are of no benefit to people. They don't cheat people. They don't go to bad places. They don't use their physical limbs to do the to do bad. And then there's what we call the third level, al-khusus al-khusus, the elect of the elect, the special ones. And these people, their hearts hold back. What do their hearts hold back from? From even thinking about anything except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So these are three levels. The general level, which is holding back from eating and drinking. There's the second level, which is holding back from doing haram things, saying haram things, going to haram places, listening to haram things, listening to that which is not allowed. And then finally, there's the person whose heart is completely with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala all the time, and it doesn't even move away from that thought. And that's the one that is fasting of the highest of levels. So they're the three categories which we're about to refer to in the text. Now, the first one, the scholars of jurisprudence, the books of fiqh, the books of law of Islam, they tell us in detail what you can and you can't do, the times of the fast. They tell you all the little details about whether you can use toothpaste, whether you can use perfume, all of those kind of rules. That's the general fast, and that's not what we're talking about here. The second one is what we're really interested in: is how do we get to that state where we really benefit from physically holding back, get the essence of the soul. And the third characteristic, the third level, is not really relevant to certainly it's not relevant to me, and it's not relevant to many people. Why? Because this is the level of the awliya, the saints, and the anbiya, the prophets. Why? Because why is it not relevant? Because once you've got to that higher level, it's no longer about, you don't really need to know any more of this because you're already with your Lord. And for us, what we should be focusing on is action, not the theoretical description of the prophets. We don't need those stories about people fasting, like say Abdul al-Jailani, for example, who was born in the month of Ramadan. When he was a baby, his mother noticed that he wouldn't eat during the day. Even as a baby, he would only feed after Maghrib. So this is a miraculous story, but what relevance does it have to us? It's a nice story, but the reality is that we should focus on that second characteristic, that second level. And that's what I'll do is that's really the introduction. Hopefully, although it's a rather long introduction, it really covers, hopefully, the meanings of the text. So as I said, I'm going to be reading from the text which I was asked to discuss, which is this one, the Al-Ghazali's adapted summary of Ihya Ulumuddin, the 40 principles of religion. And for those people who are able to access the text, it's page 55. And Imam Al-Ghazali says, as for the levels of its secrets, they are three, as I've said. The lowest of them is for a person to limit abandonment to food items without his limbs abandoning foul deeds. In other words, he gives up food and drink, but he doesn't give up bad actions. That is the fast of general people, and it brings them contentment in name only. In other words, what's meant here is that they get the rida of Allah, that Allah will be pleased with them, but it's really pleased just as a matter of that they've completed Allah's commands, therefore that's fine. However, the second level, the second is that you add to this abstention of the limbs, thus you guard the tongue from backbiting, the eye from looking askance, and likewise the rest of the body parts. This is the fast of the elite. The third is that you add to the preservation of the heart, you add to that already, the preservation of the heart from thoughts and whispering, limiting it to the remembrance of Allah. This is the fast of the elite, which is the perfect fast. So I said these are the three levels of fasting. And let's just look at what that second level in particular really means. So when it talks about the limbs, what are the limbs that we're talking about? And in the commentary of the commentary on Ihya Ulumuddin by Az-Zabidi, he says that the limbs are 6. One of these is first and probably most important is your tongue. And this this is about, as we mentioned, that he mentioned specifically in here. He says the second is that you add to this the abstention of the limbs. Thus, you guard the tongue from backbiting, etc. And the second thing, the eye, and the eye from looking askance, and likewise the rest of your body parts. What are these body parts? You've got your eye and your tongue. The others are your ears, so you don't listen to haram, because the one that listens to riba, listens to backbiting, is sharik fil itham, is that he shares in the sin of the one that speaks badly. So if somebody's speaking badly about somebody else, and you're sitting there listening and you don't do anything about it, you're a partner in his action. So the one that says it and the one that listens to it, both are the same, because the listening is just as haram as the saying, and that's what was referred to in the story, that these two people were speaking bad about somebody behind their back. What just to clarify what's meant by that, it's not just that you lie about somebody behind their back. You actually, what's meant by ghiba is that you say something that they wouldn't, that you say something that they wouldn't like you to have said to their face, or if you'd said it to their face, they would be upset. An example of this is that one of the wives of the Prophet ﷺ was particularly was overcome, so to speak, by jealousy for one of the other wives, Sayyidatuna Safiya, who was extremely beautiful. However, Sayyidatuna Safiya was also quite short in height. She wasn't very tall, and this was what was mentioned was out of jealousy, or she mentioned that the one wife mentioned to the Prophet ﷺ that Safiya is sufficient for you. And what was meant by sufficient means that she's not very tall. So what it was like a derogatory term that was used for her lack of height or short. And the Prophet ﷺ said, if all of the oceans were to wipe out the evil of the words that you've just spoken, it wouldn't do it. Meaning that's how bad the words were. And all she said was that she's sufficient for you, meaning implying in that there's not much to her, meaning physically that she's quite. So that doesn't sound like a major horrible evil thing to have said, but it's still considered to be ghiba. Why? Because it wasn't nice. So when you say something that's not pleasant about somebody in their absence, it's considered to be ghiba. And even it doesn't even have to be said. It can be implied by action. For example, if you would say, so and so, did you meet him yesterday? What's meant by that I don't know if it's the same in Singapore, but certainly this means somebody who's crazy. So when you refer to, so and so, him, and then you don't even say his name, but what you imply by that action is something derogatory about somebody who is absent. So that's what's meant by ghiba. So in this, he said, you guard the tongue from ghiba and the eye from looking askance. What it actually means is looking at anything which you're not allowed to look at. So again, referring back to one of the questions that were put last week was about pornography. This is actually an ideal opportunity for a person to train themselves to not look at haram, because now they're focusing on something which is a higher goal, and they know that during this period, it's not just food that I'm going to go without. It's actually I'm trying to control my inner qualities, and I'm trying to control my limbs. And those limbs, as we've just the two that I mentioned here, are your tongue and your eyes. And Imam Al-Ghazali mentions those two first, and in this text, the only two that he mentions, because they are the two major ones. But likewise, there's the stomach, there's the ears, which we've mentioned. The stomach is that, alhamdulillah, the fast is, the purpose of the fast is to control, but likewise, controlling the stomach during Ramadan doesn't just mean not eating during the daytime. It also means taking control of the nighttime as well, so that when you break your fast, you take care of the what you eat, that you make sure that what you've prepared is halal. And those people that are not under total lockdown are actually able to go out and break their fast in restaurants, for example, to make sure that you go to the restaurants, only the restaurants that you know there is no doubt about what they serve. So here, that's one element of controlling your stomach. Another element of controlling your stomach is not eating to excess, because a lot of people actually put on weight during Ramadan. Why? Because they eat more than they should do. And the least you should do is that the amount that you eat in Ramadan should be at least the same as you do with the rest of the meal should be at least the same kind of level, not more elaborate. Whereas actually, most people, they only have pakore and these sort of elaborate foods in Ramadan, as if Ramadan has a special food. Actually, it should be the opposite. This is the time when you tone down your food. And so the ideal situation is to eat less elaborate, and to put extra effort into making sure everything is halal. And you go that one step beyond, moving away from that which is maybe questionable. And one of the examples of this is that if you know there are two shops, one which is owned by somebody who is very careful about their money, very careful about their dealings, very careful about the way that they treat people, and there's another shop which is maybe a supermarket chain, which is just a big name, and it's impersonal, and they perhaps sell other things apart from the halal, then perhaps during the month of Ramadan you shift your allegiance from that which is still halal. The meat that these restaurants these places may sell may still be halal. I'm not saying it's haram, but maybe in Ramadan you take that extra bit of care to make sure you shift towards those places which are there's a bit more consciousness about what you're doing. What's the benefit of this? They're both halal, but what it does, it gives you that, lifts you from the fast of the first level of fast, which is just not eating, but now to concentrating. Well, what are the limbs? How can I look after my stomach during this month? And another way, of course, would be actually to eat better food. To eat better quality food would be another part of the stomach. The other is your feet. So we've got the tongue, your ears, your eyes, your stomach, and the feet and the hands. How are the hands? How do you control your hands? Is you keep your hands down. You don't raise your hand to do anything which could harm somebody else. The feet, you make sure that you never go where you're not. Where there may be some harm spiritually. You don't go to places which are associated with haram, or associated with a past that you want to be away from. So that concept of the second level is moving from going without eating and drinking to getting control of your limbs, getting control of your tongue, getting control of your eyes, getting control of your nose, getting control of your ears, getting control of all of your senses. Even the nose is something which is very powerful. There's one of the awliya, rahmatullah alayhi, who passed away earlier this year. I remember him very profoundly telling us a story. He's somebody that I loved a great deal, and much of the little knowledge I've got I took from him. But he referred to a train that he was on in the 60s. And he was on this train, and a beautiful lady got on, and he said she had very beautiful perfume. And he said that this is 20 years later. He said that he can still sometimes recall the perfume. That's the effect. Alhamdulillah, he's of a different level, because perhaps this was the only only a blink, so to speak, of desire. There was no desire there. He just mentioned that it affected him. That even the smells can affect people. And I know, alhamdulillah, another person who he'd moved away from a drug habit, but one day he was walking past and he smiled when he knew that the children on the other side of the wall were smoking cannabis, because the association of that smell brought back a memory. So even smells, you need to be careful about protecting yourself. So all of your limbs. So this is the second level, and I'm just going to perhaps finish with a few hadith just to emphasize what exactly is being meant there. The first one is the one that I mentioned, um, um, that منكم من الصائم ليس له من صومه إلا الجوع والعطش. That there are people, this relates to Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, a very strong hadith, very correct hadith, where he says that some people who fast get nothing but hunger and thirst. And then to take that one step further, there's a hadith which is related by Al-Hakim and Mustadrak and Al-Tabrani. He says, "Another sahmun samumun min sihami iblis," that looking, gazing, or looking. And what's meant by this is looking at the haram. So where a man looks at a woman, or a woman looks at a man who is physically attractive, this is called a nadra. So this nadra is, what is it? Sahman samuman min sihami iblis. This is one of the arrows that are shot by Iblis, that is shot at you by Iblis. And even the imagery that's used in the West of Cupid, the Greek god of love, is that he's a little devil, so to speak, who shoots this arrow. So this glance at the haram is a poisonous arrow shot at you. So when a beautiful woman walks past, or a beautiful man walks past, and this is attractive to you, you should know that this is a poison. And if man tarakaha khawfan min Allah, whoever leaves it, and this is what the concept here I'm trying to get through and get over, or Imam Al-Ghazali is trying to get over, and I'm conveying it as best I possibly can, and may Allah forgive me, is whoever does this khawfan min Allah, out of fear from Allah, that he does this with intention, that this is the purpose of my soul, this is the purpose of my fast, I will not follow any desire that enters into my heart as a result of seeing that beautiful woman. As a result of that, what will happen? Atahu Allah Azza wa Jal imanan. Allah will give him iman. What kind of iman? Yajidu halawatahu fi qalbihi. That he will find that kind of faith will have a sweet taste in his heart. Why? Because he's given up what Allah doesn't want him to have. So the poisonous arrow hit him, but he pushed it away. I don't want anything to do with that. What do I want? I want Allah to be pleased with me. And as a result, Allah will pour into his heart a contentment, a faith that will be sweet tasting. And the imagery is really important here, because this sweet tasting faith is what we're striving for. And this, what we're giving up, is the taste of these worldly things for a limited number of hours, food and drink. But hopefully, as a result of this, we will have this sweet taste of a true faith that will last for years. So that's why the measurement of the quality of the fast is not on whether you managed to do 17 hours, 10 hours, or 5 hours, whatever the length of the days, or whether you had diabetes and you didn't fast and you actually gave fidya. This isn't the real element. Is what are you like after Ramadan? And one of the poems that I always like to refer to when I think of Eid is, there's a statement where one of the poets of early days said, لَيْسَ الْعِيدْ لِمَنْ لَبِسَ الْجَدِيدُ وَإِنَّمَا الْعِيدْ لِمَنْ طَاعَتَهُ تَزِيدُ. Actually, the Eid is not for the one who wears beautiful clothes, who wears beautiful new clothes. Actually, the Eid is for celebration of the one whose obedience to Allah has increased. So if at the end of the fast, at the end of the month of fasting, you are a better person in terms of these things, which is looking after your tongue, looking after your eyes, looking after your stomach, looking after your feet, looking after your hands, looking after your ears, if you're better at all of these things, and then ultimately looking after your heart, your emotions, your feelings, your thoughts, which is the higher level, then you really deserve to celebrate Eid. And finally, I'll finish with a hadith which is perhaps technically weak, but it summarizes what was said, and and I think it's a relevant hadith to finish with. خمسا يفطرن الصائم. There are 5 things which break the fast of the fasting person. الكذب, lying, والغيبة, and backbiting, والنميمة, slander, واليمين الكاذبة, and swearing false oaths, والنظر بشهوة, and looking at the opposite sex, or looking at something with desire. So, although that's the link to the Prophet ﷺ is not authentically interrogated, or its authenticity hasn't been interrogated as fully as other hadith, I think it's a good summary that is valid and has a chain of narrators, and I think it summarizes the whole chapter. Finally, the chapter, I will read the last few words of the chapter just so for completion. Finally, fasting has a seal by which it is completed. Is it that a person breaks the fast with undoubtedly permissible food? And we've talked about that, about how important it is to really focus on when you make your iftar, and does not eat excessively, compensating for what he missed in the morning by combining 2 meals at once. So you don't eat double the amount in Ramadan. Doing so will cause his gut to become heavy and strengthen his desire, whereby the secret of fasting and its benefit is nullified. So in other words, hunger is part of the fast, and that we should strive to feel something of the fast. And if you eat too much at night, this leads to laziness with the night prayer, and perhaps him not waking up for even the Fajr prayer, for the Subh prayer, the morning prayer, all of which is a great loss that perhaps the benefit of fasting cannot balance out. So, alhamdulillah, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us fulfill those all of those principles, to lift us from the level of general fasting to the level of a higher level of fasting, where we not only do without food and water, but we actually do without doing any kind of bad actions with any of our limbs. That's the chapter on fasting, and I believe before Khalid comes in that perhaps it might be worth just reflecting on the rest of the book, because if we've completed the chapter on fasting, there may be other relevant things for the remaining sessions before Ramadan actually enters. And as I said last week, this book is built around 40 chapters or 40 lessons, and part 3 of the book talks about the blameworthy characteristics, and they are gluttony, licentiousness, which is sharr al-kalam, speaking badly, anger, envy, stinginess, and love of wealth, just chasing the dunya, frivolity and the love of status, and love of the world, pride, self-admiration, ujub, ostentation. So these 10 chapters are perhaps things that we might want to reflect on later, and I'm open to choose any. I'm happy to look at any of those areas, and perhaps I'll leave that for people to suggest. I'm not saying that it would then democratically, but certainly if people leave a preference in the messages, or get the messages to Khalid, then I'll try my best, or we'll try our best to deliver a lesson on one or possibly 2 of those. And with that, inshallah, I'll hand over to Khalid for questions and answers, inshallah.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you, Shaykh Abdul Aziz, for that
Just
wonderful.
while we're waiting for Khalid,
You cannot hear me.
I'll just read those 10 again. Gluttony, which is just eating, gluttony, desire, sure, time. Licentiousness, which is bad speech, which includes things like lying, backbiting, some of the things we touched on today. Anger, envy, stinginess, just wanting money all the time and holding on to search frivolity, just and hubb al-jah. Hubb al-jah means like loving status, to try to be bigger than uh, they are. Love of the world, pride, self admiration, ostentation. So these are the ten chapters, and inshallah, hopefully, now will be an opportunity for people to um, perhaps uh, put questions, or perhaps even to think about those 10 sections, inshallah. I think perhaps we might have another technical, not quite sure. Uh, but those are the 10 chapters, and perhaps one of them we could look at next. My personal inclination is that any of those, anger, gluttony, um, are all very, very, very relevant and important. Um, being able to control our tongues. One of the questions that came up last week was about anger, hasad, um, how to deal with envy in your heart. Love of the world is very important, because the Prophet ﷺ says among the things that destroy people is hubb al mal, hubb al jah, love of status, a love of always wanting to be somebody, and certainly love of the dunya is the other thing, and kibr, pride, and ujub. Ujub is an interesting one, where it's one step beyond um, just being boastful, because ujub you can actually do in the privacy of your own home. For example, to pray in front of people uh, is one thing, but perhaps um, when you pray at home, do long prayers, and you say, "Oh, look how good I am," and nobody's actually watching you, but you yourself are starting to take pride in what you're doing. Then um, this would indicate you have what we call ujub. So any of these qualities, perhaps it might be worth looking at um, over the next lesson. And I believe that Khalid is about to come back, inshallah, um, with the questions and answers. I think we still have some technical difficulties. As I said, they're the next 10 chapters, and the following 10 chapters. The following 10 chapters will be some of what we call the munjiyat, the good characteristics that help us to overcome those. For example, tawbah, repentance, which is also very clearly connected to fasting. That fasting, one of the purposes of fasting is to clean out all the junk physically and mentally and spiritually. And tawbah, the meaning of tawbah, repentance, is to clean out all of the dirt from your life. So that might be one that we also might want to look at. Sabr, of course, is another one, and shukr, inshallah. And I believe Khalid is back.
Shaykh,
Jazakumullah khair.
Shaykh, can you hear
How are
me?
you? I can hear you fine.
Thank you. Sorry in technical fault. So
No
sorry.
problem.
Alhamdulillah,
It's a
all
blessing
the
to be able to talk across so many thousands of miles. So it's a few seconds is not a problem. Alhamdulillah.
mashallah. It's a profound lesson we learn that fasting is more than just abstaining food and drink. Alhamdulillah, there's a lot of things for us to introspect ourselves, to better ourselves and engage worship. Okay, the first question is someone who has to do with himself because he's a domestic violence abuser. He said, "Dear Jay, 2 years ago I had to divorce my wife because of my abusive character, and I've been abusing her for many years. And then the realizations of abusing her came to my guilt after we separated, and that abuse also happen in the month of Ramadan. And right now, I'm struggling to overcome my past and also to improve myself. I mean, I'm trying to rephrase this words. So, what advice you have for me right now?
What rights? Sorry, I'm not quite. What rights does she have? Sorry, is that what you said?
No, he was saying that he's been abusing her, and they already divorced, but
Yeah.
the guilt came, and he still feels that he's not been improving himself with the anger and all these things. So he's trying his best to improve himself, and he realized that even in Ramadan, he
Mhm.
not changing over the years. So with this Ramadan, he has this aspiration to improve. So what advice you have for him?
Um, as I said, perhaps just to reflect on some of the things that we've said, that the fast is not about um, the eating and drinking. The real fast is about controlling one's emotions, controlling one's feelings, controlling the way one behaves, and that's the real lesson. And perhaps just to go over some of the things that we've just said might help to reflect, and perhaps that might be an indication of what we need to do next in the next lesson, as of those 10 chapters that I just mentioned.
Yeah, just
One
mentioned.
probably most relevant to him is anger, how to deal with anger. Um, and then of the next section, so to speak, of the book, the two areas that probably are most important for him are, are Toba, repentance, turning how to turn back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And perhaps the most important is the last chapter, which is remembrance of death. And this chapter on remembrance of death is probably the it comes right at the end of Ihya Ulumuddin. And the reason why it's so important is because if you understand death and you realize, when I say realize, the word realize means to make a reality inside your heart. The word, we use the word, do you realize? We use it so very commonly. However, the real meaning of realize is to make a thing a reality in your heart. When we realize the meaning of death, that the meaning of death comes in our hearts, and that's for many people is what changes their life totally. And I think last week I mentioned Sarah and how she's unable to fast, but actually there's much more to that story. Is that Alhamdulillah she was on a journey, but the most important part of her journey was probably when she was in intensive care on a ventilator a few years ago, and when she came out of that, she said that that experience was what changed her life completely because the death became the reality to her. And I remember teaching a course on the remembrance of death before that, and she said that it really affected her and kind of prepared her for what she felt. And then afterwards, the first thing she wanted, my dars after she came out of hospital, could you teach the class on remembrance of death? Why? Because the meaning of death had come so close to her. And every single thing that happened in her life after that was related to the fact that she nearly died. And likewise now with this coronavirus situation, for us it was not such a big shock because we've known all along since she came out of hospital. The doctor said the next time she gets a virus, it will probably kill her. So it's as if we've already known what to expect. What really hit me was when I read a doctor saying how difficult it was when somebody came to the hospital in London and they told the patient, would you like to die in hospital, alone, on a ventilator with one nurse, or do you want to die at home? Because she was positive with coronavirus, and it was clear because of her age and her condition that she wasn't going to get through this. So here, that reality of death is now grasping everybody. You walk in the street, and I remember just walking past the lady a couple of weeks ago. She looked at me in shock because she thought I was walking too close to her. I was standing the mandatory 2 meters away, and I wasn't going to come anywhere near her. But the shock and the fear in her face was quite shocking. It was quite scary actually. But this is because the reality of death has hit her. So this chapter on the reality of death and the chapter on Tawbah, repentance, are probably the two chapters at the end of the book, the last part of the book, that are so important. So to answer the brother's question again, you need to think, you need to study, you need to reflect. You also need to practice what's in here, the practicalities about dealing with anger. And inshallah, like I said, I'm leaving that open to you and everybody else to make suggestions of which of those chapters we look at. And perhaps this brother, I imagine he might want to vote for the chapter on anger and
Inshallah.
all of those.
Thank you.
But it does need require knowledge, and we need to look at what's said
Yeah,
there, inshallah.
I think it's important to learn on that because we are dealing with it, and only in Ramadan we begin to realize because things are different in Ramadan, our schedule, our routine, So that's where we begin to self introspect and realize about our hidden weaknesses or defects and nerves. Yeah. Coming to what you shared about your wife, Sarah, may Allah preserve her health. Um,
Ameen, ameen.
uh, I also had that because 2 years ago, a doctor was diagnosed me that I was supposed to die, and I didn't. Alhamdulillah, I know what we required that change my Ramadan, the way how I see Ramadan, and me and I know actually change. And then we couldn't go to the mosque, and we one whole month we spent at home and we watch Euro 28. And but coming to this situation, relate, this Ramadan for sure, inshallah, we will not be having Trawih at the mosque or breaking fast at the mosque, which is known in our society in Singapore and all over the world. I've been to Singapore Masjid Alwi, which was also my favorite and place that I almost every day I will go there in Ramadan for Trawih. So some people are asking your advice. How do we, I would say, shape or instill that mindset about not praying the more? But of course, you said before, the most important is worship. You can pray anywhere, but to I don't know the right word to cultivate or to instill mindset that Allah is still there and we are worshipping Him. You get what I mean? To that
Yeah,
level, yeah.
I think this is a very big opportunity for us to reflect and to go back to what is the purpose of the prayer. What is the purpose of this fast? How do we benefit? Because a lot will depend on individual people's states. And I'll give you the example of somebody who's a family person. That person uh, who may have children, they need, if especially if those children are starting to grow, if they're maybe young children, 11, 12, this is the time that they need to be with their family. And the Taraweeh, if somebody goes to the mosque and spends all night doing 20 rak'ah and then tahajjud and neglects the children, then it might be that those children are not exposed to the nafahat, those blessings, those blessed breezes of this month of Ramadan. So perhaps for that person to stay at home and do 8 rak'ah, which are short and easy for the family, would be better, or 20 if they can, but short and easy, so that they feel the essence of the fast of the Tarawih. And then after they've gone to bed, then they do the 8 rak'at on their own, nice, long, at peace, one to one. So their focus there would be on bringing the family together. Then somebody else might be, they may be a relatively young couple, for example, who don't have children. But their focus should then be on each other to inculcate the love that can descend around hearing the Quran. So for them, what they might want to do is to do maybe slightly longer prayers, but in between the prayers they spend time with the Quran. So that what comes to them descends the Quran. Then a person might be a single person that's actually has no other responsibilities, that's living alone. So their role is to focus on their relationship with their Lord. Somebody else might be working in a hospital, and might not. So his role or her role is to do short rak'ah, only just 2 rak'ah perhaps, and then get on with the job of looking after. But know that while they're looking after people that are ill, they're getting the reward, because Allah has put on this earth people whose role it is to serve on His behalf. So they've been chosen to be nurses, doctors, or whatever it is, and that they are the most beloved of people, because they are the ones who benefit Allah's creation the most. So each person should look at, how can I get the most out of Ramadan? And for example, one of the things I've been thinking about all this the last 24 hours on and off, I've been thinking, how much teaching should I do in Ramadan, for example? Because my plan originally was to go to Africa for most of Ramadan and just hide away from everybody. That's not going to happen. I may be locked up in Glasgow. But does this mean that now I should be doing something different? Because I know that, alhamdulillah, perhaps I might be able to impart some knowledge. So that kind of question, everybody should ask their own circumstances. How can I get the best to replace the Taraweeh that we took for granted? Because you're right, whenever I'm in Singapore, I only like to stay in Masjid Ba'alawi for Taraweeh. And in fact, when I'm in Scotland, I usually pray at home anyway, because I don't feel that same feeling as I do going to that one particular mosque you mentioned. But that's me. So everyone has to make their own kind of plan so that they can take full advantage according to their circumstances, inshallah.
MashaAllah, Shaykh, that's a beautiful advice on how we go about and to see appropriately what's there for us to gain in this blessed month despite the epidemic situation. Um, Shaykh, you mentioned just now about Salat Tarawih and that connect with the Quran. And some question comes in the point that a lot of people, I rephrasing actually, a lot of people are trying their best in Ramadan to always khatam the Quran, but many of them say that they fail. So how do
Yes. Sorry, excuse me 1 second. Apologies.
it's okay, Sheikh. No problem. How's Idris?
It's live. You don't want them on. You want to come here and play with me? Sorry about it. Inshallah. So see other people. Everyone has their own circumstances, and
Yeah.
you
But we
my
learn from you,
my
mashallah.
responsibility in
You're a
Ramadan and Tarawih
you
is
are
different.
a teacher led by example. I think this is crucial for us, especially in Singapore, to see how we should respond appropriately to our environment. And I think a lot of times people want things to be perfect so that they can do perfect things, like everything is easy. But sometimes we learn in difficult situations. That's where we find ways to grow closer to Allah, even taking care of our children, like you mentioned just now. Uh, Coming back to my question just now, a lot of people have this high aspiration to khatam the Quran in Ramadan. It's a norm. Everybody knows that. And that's the biggest dilemma. But most of the people also they would say that they fail to khatam the Quran to maybe not spending the right time, or maybe they felt like it's too heavy to read certain surah. What's your advice for people still trying to find ways to khatam the Quran besides making their time in reading the Quran?
The most important thing is to connect to the Quran, and connecting to the Quran has to be at the level that you're at. And if people can do the whole Quran, that's good. But what's more important is they make this connection to the Quran, and it reminds me of a couple of things. One Ramadan I was fortunate enough to spend in Abu Dhabi, in Dubai, and I was went to spend. I was invited to do iftar and tarawih with the Mufti, the Maliki Mufti of Dubai, a great Shaykh called Shaykh Muhammad Abdul. So I'd heard about this man, and I was really looking forward to seeing him. I'd never met him. I'd never seen a photograph of him. I didn't know anything except when I went to his house, the brother dropped me at the door. Alhamdulillah, he dropped me and Sarah at the door, and then he drove to get parking. Alhamdulillah, I went into the house, and this man came out in his vest and his sarong. And I knew immediately from the light on his face this was Sheikh Muhammad Abdul. And I went and kissed his hand out of respect. And Sarah looked and says, "Oh, my husband, we were recently married." She looked and she says, "Oh, my husband, he goes around kissing everybody's hands, even the caretaker." So we went in and we broke fast. And then obviously came to Maghrib. Sheikh Muhammad Abdul says, "I'm not leading the salah." I says, "You have to. We came here to pray behind you." He says, "No, if you don't lead the prayer, I'm not praying." I looked at his face and I knew he was telling the truth. So I accepted that, So I led the Maghrib prayer. It came to the Isha, he prayed 2 rak'ah. And then he stopped. And then he let people relax. But there was this feeling in those 2 rak'ah of prayer, which was completely different to the days before when I was in the mosque, where they did a juz and a half in the mosque. Because what happened in that experience with that sheikh was that it was the quality. It was two rak'ah of salah, but it was enough. And I asked somebody afterwards, does he always just do 2? He says, no, sometimes he does 2 here, then he does 2 later. And over the night, he does many rak'ah. But he actually focused on the quality of the prayer, not on the length of the prayer. And this man is a real giant when it comes to knowledge. And I learned from that actually what's more important is the quality of your experience in Ramadan. And the quality of that experience on that one night witnessing with Shaykh Muhammad Abdul was better than some of the nights when I've done Khatam of Quran in the Haram of Mecca. And that's my true experience. The following year, I was giving a talk, and I told a story about a companion who when he was appointed to lead the prayer in Kuba, I think it was, he went there. He was told to go there, and in the first rak'ah, the first prayer, he read Qul Huwallahu Ahad. The second one, he read Qul Huwallahu Ahad. He says, okay, maybe he's tired. The next day, he did Qul Huwallahu Ahad. Qul Huwallahu Ahad. The shortest surah in the Quran. Every single rak'ah, he was reading the same surah. The people said, the Prophet ﷺ sent us somebody to teach us Quran. All he reads is Qul Huwallahu. So they complained to the Prophet ﷺ. He called him. He says, why do you do this? Why do you read Qul Huwallahu Ahad only and no other surahs? He says, I love it, Ya Rasulullah. And then he turned to the people and he says, he loves it and it loves her. It loves him. So here I told this story, and there's this one brother who became Muslim the year before that, a Scottish guy. He started to cry. And afterwards I asked him, so I'm sorry, if I upset you? He says, no. When you said that story, it really meant a lot to me, because before he became Muslim, he'd started to study Quran and Arabic language. And that's how he became Muslim. So he'd actually memorized, I think it was Surah Tariq, and this was his favorite surah. So when he became Muslim and he got to Ramadan, every single Taraweeh, he read Surah Tariq and nothing else. And the people came and they complained. He says, you know so much, but why do you only... So when he heard this story, it really affected him. And what I learned from these 2 experiences of mine is that actually it's the quality of your connection to the Quran, not completing the Quran. And if you can't complete the Quran, but you get that quality, then what more can you ask for? What more can you ask for? So don't focus on Khatam of Quran or Taraweeh, 20 rak'ats, 36 rak'at, or what. Focus on the quality, inshallah, and it'll be better for you, inshallah.
MashaAllah, Shaykh, we learn from your wisdom, inshallah. Thank you very much for that. The next question is, Shaykh, you mentioned that to gaze at a beautiful man or woman that we desire is like an arrow of Iblis, and to refrain from it would bring us the sweetness of Iman from Allah. However, we also hear that the first gate that isn't on purpose is forgiven. And if it's the first case is okay, what is your advice for men and women with regards to this issue?
The person is correct that when there's a hadith which says the first nadra is is in effect, it means there's no punishment. So if you look up and there's a beautiful woman in front of you, then that won't be held. You won't be held responsible. You won't be punished. You won't. There won't be any punishment, so to speak, as a result of that. However, if you look a second time, then that's what's meant by the responding to this poison, is that you're actually seeking the poison by taking a second look. So the two hadith are not incompatible. They actually mean the same thing. Is that if you do that, just accept this is a poison arrow, reject it. And that's what's meant here, is that if that happens, that if a man sees a beautiful woman, a woman sees a handsome man, that they don't pursue it, they don't act on it, they don't allow it to enter into their heart and just fester in there, because that will kill them. That will kill them. Once it gets into their heart, it will destroy them. And that's what's meant by it being a poisoned arrow. And Allah knows best.
Thank you, Shaykh. The next question, you mentioned about being careful about our money and as things that are haram can affect us. We also know about times we have to take jobs like cabin crew or transportation or even events where we have to handle alcohol. Do you have any advice on how we can handle such situations uh, where we don't directly sell or ask people to consume the haram, but it's part of the job indirectly? How can we handle this situation appropriately and still keep to our job to feed our families?
Right. The most important thing here is to ask Allah to help you. And this is the key to this, and this is that you must make dua from your heart when to make your rizq halal. And there's many very beautiful du'as. I think perhaps if you have just
Yeah,
a few minutes, maybe I can actually
it's okay.
refer to one of them.
It's okay. No problem.
This du'a is the du'a of Surah Al-Waqiyah. And Surah Al-Waqiyah is a surah that everybody should try and be acquainted with, be familiar with. That you should try and read every day if you get the opportunity, especially if money is one of the concerns that you have in your life. The reason why is because the Surah Al-Waqiyah opens up the rizq for people, and that it opens up the provisions. Allah descends provisions around the recitation. Also, it lifts out the fear of poverty from people's hearts. So to read Surah Al-Waqiyah is one beautiful thing. But there's also a dua, there's several du'as, and one of them is the following dua. Allah in kana rizquna fis sama fa'anzilhu. Oh Allah, if our rizqi, as you say in Malay, our provision is in the sky, descend it. Wa in kana fil ardi fa'akhrijhu. And if it's under the ground, send it up. Wa in kana mu'assaran. If it's difficult, فيسره, make it easy for us. وإن كان بعيدا فقربه, and if it's far, make it close. وإن كان حراما فطهره, and if it's haram, purify it. وإن كان قليلا فكثره, and if it's a little, make it lots. وإن كان معدوما فأوجده, and if it's non-existent, make it exist. وإن كان موقوفا فأجره, and if it's paused, make it run. وإن كان ذنبا فاغفره, and if it's through sin, then wipe it out. وإن كان سيئة فامحوها, and if it's transgression, overlook it. وإن كان خطيئة فتجاوز عنها, and if it's a mistake, then overlook it. وإن كان أثرة فأقلها, and if it's problematic, make it little, make the problems little. So in other words, the meaning of this dua is to ask him to make things easier for you. And then if it's one of these things which are very clearly haram, then you make steps to get out of it. And if it's one of these situations where it's not haram, but I could maybe get something which is more wholesome and there might be more blessing in it, then start to look if there's something which might have more blessing in it. And it doesn't. But if you know that it's a difficult one, then you start looking and you start making this dua or any dua from your heart to try and get you out of this situation. And Allah will make it easy for people. If your intention is pure and you ask Him, He will sort it out, inshallah.
Inshallah. Thank you, Shaykh. Amin to your dua. Thank you, Shaykh. This is the last question since we had run out of time. The last question is, Shaykh, you mentioned about protecting our ears from ghibah, backbiting, and how even implying it is blameworthy. How do you advise we practice this if we have colleagues or friends who are constantly doing it in our presence? We can't leave the place or stop them because they indulge in it. Do we plug in your phone and listen to music as a way? What is your advice on how we apply this advice? Thank you.
This is a really very important question because we're all faced with work situations where the culture that we live in is not conducive to the way that we would like I like to live. And I remember about 3 years ago, I moved jobs within the same organization with the same government agency. And it was quite difficult to move into an office-based environment. And in the end, I just didn't really socialize. And everybody kind of thought I was a little bit weird and a little bit kind of strange, but it was fine. But what slowly happened was that there was one or two people realized that I was very good at what I did. And then they started to come a bit, kind of open up a little bit to me. And slowly things got easier. But in the beginning in particular, it was very, very difficult socially because I didn't want to engage with the kind of behavior that was so normal. And I found it more difficult there than I did in schools. Because although in schools there was a lot of people would swear and they're very loud, but deep down it was not this insidious, this nastiness. And here I found that I was now working with people that were very actually nasty. And the only thing I could do was just to withdraw as best I could physically and not be there at the times when bad things were happening. When they invited me for socializing, I just had to, alhamdulillah, I used the excuse of my little kid over here that, well, I can't, I need to look after, I've got family commitments. And alhamdulillah, I just got on with the job. And so we need to struggle. And in the end, you might be isolated. And that's the reality. I can't pretend that there's an easy answer. Sometimes you just need to get up and leave. When people are doing bad things, sometimes you just need to get up and leave. And when you can't do that, then in your heart, you must make dua for you to be able to get out of the situation. Because the least thing you should do is in your heart know, Allah, please take me from this company or change the company. And you will find actually that in the end, by being firm and sticking to your principles, people will always recognize, actually, you shouldn't do this. Because I remember somebody swore in front of me when I was a manager in one of the posts I was previously in. And they said, how could you swear in front of Abdul Aziz? And he says, I swear all the time. He says, yeah, but it's Abdul Aziz. These are two non-Muslim women who were shouting at each other. One of them because she was so disrespectful because she said a bad word. And there's nothing to do with religion, but was because the expectations was higher. So sometimes you can continue to engage, but you have to engage on your terms. And in the end, Allah will give us tawfiq. We ask Allah to make this Ramadan a Ramadan where we can rise higher than these base qualities that we're describing here. And inshallah, Allah will take us out from this situation. And interestingly, Allah removed me from that job in the end. Alhamdulillah.
Thank you, Shaykh. Abdul, also. Okay, please, we have come to an end to for the Q&A. We like to thank Abdul Aziz for the 2 weeks or to Sunday for this lesson book by Imam Ghazali that uh, teach us. So, Shaykh, before you leave, so actually, need to say, we will continue with Shaykh Abdul Aziz next book, inshallah, as he mentioned just now, and we will discuss with him. And I'm pretty sure a lot of people will like to learn from it. I've been receiving a lot of positive feedback about it. So, before you leave, okay,
Jazakumullah khair.
okay. Before we leave, just like to say thank you very much to all those volunteers who are helping us and those who uh, give us feedback and all that. We're also looking for sponsors to uh, what we call it to for our online and video production to improve it. Inshallah, and you can PM us if you are willing to sponsor. And with this, I'd like to say thank you very much, and we apologize for any inconvenience. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh.